Hey everyone, this is Zach with 8020 Automotive, here today with a video on the traction control warning light, why is it on, and how to diagnose it. So both traction control and stability control are important safety features on many modern vehicles that are designed to help the vehicle regain traction and remain stable if traction is potentially lost. However, as electronic systems, that does mean that both the traction control and stability control systems are prone to potential issues. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump straight in and discuss some of the most common causes of the traction control light being on. Starting off with number one is if you manually disable traction control on your vehicle. Now again, traction control can be a very important and beneficial safety feature on vehicles. However, in certain driving conditions, traction control can actually be very limiting and harmful for traction or getting out of a tough situation. If you're on a sheet of ice or stuck in some mud, it can be helpful to turn off the traction control and stability control systems to be able to allow the wheels to spin enough to actually get you out of that situation or get you moving. So ultimately, most vehicles equipped with traction control and stability control have a button which will allow you to manually disable the systems. And oftentimes, if you push your traction control button, that will display the light on the dashboard just to inform you that while you're behind the wheel, that system is disabled. One thing to point out here is if you're noticing trip after trip and after restarting your vehicle multiple times that the traction control light is still coming back on, then this likely isn't the case unless you're pushing the button every time or potentially the vehicle is modified. But on most stock vehicles, the traction control should automatically turn itself back on after the car is restarted, but still can be helpful to try locating and pushing that traction control light just to make sure that it isn't manually disabled. Moving on to a second common cause, we have a bad wheel speed sensor. Modern vehicles are equipped with 4 wheel speed sensors, 1 sensor in each wheel of the vehicle, and that's critical data for the anti-lock braking system, or ABS for short, and traction control systems, as they need to be able to monitor the speed of each wheel individually, and that data then helps determine when the ABS or traction control systems may be required and when the car may start to engage those systems. So a faulty wheel speed sensor is certainly one of the most common causes, especially if you're seeing on your dashboard that both the ABS and traction control or stability control lights are turned on. A lot of the times that will circle back to a bad wheel speed sensor. And with 4 of them on modern vehicles, that leaves a lot of room for potential issues. Moving on to number 3, we have a faulty steering angle sensor. So another important thing for traction control and ABS systems is to know the steering angle and the direction the vehicle and wheels are pointed, as that data is very important. If you're taking especially a sharper corner, the inside wheels will actually travel less distance, so that alongside the wheel speed sensors is very critical data for the ABS and traction control system. So if you have an issue with that steering angle sensor, then again, that could cause the traction control light and in a lot of cases also the ABS warning light, indicating issues with potentially the steering system, oftentimes quite a bit less common than a faulty wheel speed sensor. Moving on to a fourth common cause, we have a bad ABS module or pump. As I've kind of mentioned throughout the last couple things, the ABS, traction control, and stability control systems are very closely intertwined, and it's actually the ABS module that's responsible for tracking all of this data and determining when to engage these various systems. So if you have any sort of issue with the ABS module or the ABS pump, that will often trigger both the ABS and traction control warning lights. However, there can be cases where in the ABS control module, depending on the specific fault or issue within that module, it could just be affecting the traction control system and not affecting ABS. So even if your ABS warning light isn't on, a bad ABS module still could potentially be causing issues with the traction control system and with that warning light illuminating on your dashboard. Moving on to the fifth and final cause of the traction control warning light being on, a couple miscellaneous issues kind of lumped together here, things that aren't very common but can indeed trigger the traction control or ABS warning lights. Potentially low voltage can cause this issue. If you have a bad battery or a bad alternator, that could affect the amount of voltage that the ABS module is seeing and in turn trigger these warning lights. Additionally, low tire pressure may cause this issue. as well as low brake fluid, and then lastly, some various electrical issues and potentially fuses. Now, with all the common causes out of the way, how do you actually diagnose a traction control warning light? So this can potentially be complicated depending on the underlying issue, but it's always good to start with the basics. The best first step is using an OBD2 scanner, plugging that into the OBD2 port of your vehicle and reading any fault codes. Those fault codes can help point you in the correct direction. For example, if the underlying problem is a faulty wheel speed sensor, the OBD2 port and an OBD2 scanner, that fault code will be stored in the computer, and that OBD2 scanner will be able to read that and help point you in the right direction and even tell you what wheel of the vehicle that is coming from. Otherwise, start with the very basics. Locate the traction control button in your vehicle if you are able to manually engage or disengage the traction control system. Locate that traction control button and understand how to engage and disengage the system. Otherwise, some of the other basics include ensuring that you have proper tire pressure in all of your tires, ensuring that you do have the proper amount of brake fluid and that you're not significantly past due any kind of brake fluid flush or change. Oftentimes, between checking those fault codes and starting with the basics, that can help point you in the right direction. But if you're really not getting any information out of that, it could be a more complicated issue that may require professional help or an experienced DIYer. Anyway, guys, that wraps up our video for today. If you appreciated the content, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for more in the future. Thanks, everyone.